This is Flashpoint. It's a TV show on the Victory Network, owned and operated by Kenneth Copeland. The host of the Victory Network is the host of Flashpoint is this guy right here, Gene Bailey. It is a far-right Christian nationalist, evangelical kind of network and TV show. It's nutty. This is not the first part. If you haven't seen the others, don't sweat it. You don't have to see the others to understand what's happening. I'll provide context if it's required. This stands independently of the rest. But in the previous part, they were talking about how evil student loan forgiveness is, despite the fact that they all got, PPP loan forgiveness. They're just forgetting that. Plus all the tax bailouts and subsidies and everything that go to billionaires. They're just pretending that doesn't happen. So they talked about student loan forgiveness and how evil it is, of course. And right when we left off, this was Tulsi Gabbard, who is very clearly a right-winger now. I don't think anybody has any doubts of that at this point. She was talking about getting rid of Title IX, which is sex discrimination protections. Seriously. That's where we're at right now. So let's give it a listen and see what they have to say now.
Pastor Mark, what she said is really very true. I mean, the left can't even define what a woman is, so right. I guess it's only natural to erase women.
This is all just propagandistic nonsense. The left, quote unquote, is something called a weasel word. It's calling out to some ill-defined, ambiguous authority that represents an entire group or whatever, first of all. And second, people are capable of defining woman. They just don't like the definition we give. Usually the definition I use of woman is a person that has characteristics traditionally associated with people who are assigned female at birth or something like that. It's not a perfect definition by any means, but it's something. So the point here is they can complain about not being able to define woman all they want. People define woman all the time. They're just using this as a piece of propaganda to attack others, to make them look unhinged and incapable and all that other stuff. It was just nonsensical propaganda. That's it.
Got a responsibility as Bible-believing conservatives, Christians here in America. We've got to stand up and stand against ridiculous things like this. Pastor Mark, what's your thoughts?
Gene, we've allowed a Pandora's box to be opened. You understand right now in California, where so-called trans women, which are men who claim to be a woman, are now being allowed in female prison facilities.
Okay, first of all, I don't know that that's true. What was it? Where did he say this is supposedly happening?
And right now in California, where so-called trans women...
In California, trans women are being allowed into women's facilities like jails and stuff. Is that even true? Is that made up? Let's find out. Looks like California prisons are considering gender identity housing requests. This is all the way back from April 5th, 2021. It's from the LA Times. I'm just kind of glancing through here. Okay, it looks like just over 1% or 1,100 California inmates identify as non-binary, intersex, or transgender, according to the Corrections Department. So this is an almost non-existent problem that they're screaming and crying about as though they're being persecuted. But, this is the far-right playbook. When something's happening that they don't like, pretend that they're the ones being persecuted, even when they're the ones doing the persecuting, first of all. And second, trans issues are an incredibly popular thing to attack right now in society. Every applause line at, Trump rallies lands on a trans joke or some kind of a trans attack of sorts. It's honestly deeply sad. The most vulnerable among us in the population, minority groups that have historically been attacked and degraded and made fun of, are the most popular to attack today. Honestly sad. And Trump is playing right into it. Why? Because he's a scumbag, of course. The point is, I'm not even sure if this is true. I'm not even sure if what Mark Burns is saying here is truthful. It's very possible. I would venture as far as to say likely that he's making it up. I couldn't find anything about that happening in California. I saw that they had considered it. I didn't see anything about them housing trans people in the cells that match their gender identity or whatever else.
Which men who claim to be a woman are now being allowed in female prison facilities. There are cases of women getting pregnated by these so-called trans women.
Oh, please give me evidence of that. If that's true, I would love to see it. Please. Any evidence at all. I'll take one example. Just one is all I'm looking for right now. I will take anything. There are no examples of this that this guy has. I have not heard of this happening literally ever. I've heard of people screaming about it and saying it's gonna happen. Never heard of this happening. You remember when we were in like middle school, we used to hear a lot about rainbow parties and how evil they were? You guys remember that? Where conservatives or teachers or whoever would talk about like 7 girls put lipstick on and then the dude and the rainbow and all that stuff. Those are completely fake too. They're fake. It was a moral panic. This was not happening. I have been involved in the adult world for like many years now. You know, I'm married, I've got a kid, and I've been around a lot of people. Rainbow parties are not a thing. Completely fabricated. All of the problems that these people present are fabricated. They're fake. They are just moral panic. And they pretend that it's really happening right now. Ridiculous.
The California prison systems. When are the real women are going to stand up? They have to stand up louder than ever. And it is our responsibility, number one, as the body of Christ, to...
So he's trying to encourage women to become TERFs, basically, is what he's doing here.
Bring back into the center of American culture God's intention for man and God's intention for woman. Listen, this is without a shadow of a doubt, America, the liberal left, attempt to remove God from the presence of America. If you can remove God, then therefore you can decide what sex you are, you can decide what race you are, you can decide what gender you are. And
dude, what does God have to do with any of that stuff? Like, God didn't talk about, God didn't talk about how evil it was for you to pick your own gender or race or sexuality or whatever, did he? I don't remember much about that. Jesus didn't say a single thing about being gay. But this guy is reading it into parts of the Bible. He wants it to be in the Bible, so he's going to pretend that it's there. That's how these people work. They pretend to be victims when they're not, and pretend that the Bible supports their absurd positions on things. And if you don't follow their interpretation of the Bible, you are victimizing them. That's how this works.
The Pandora box is this. The transgender, and you understand that the LGBTQ community is speaking out against the transgender community. You understand that there is now a uproar within the LGB community. They want to remove the T from their so-called gay movement.
Who's doing this? Who's causing this problem? Yeah, there is some what's the word here? There is some discrimination against the trans community, but generally speaking, for the most part, the LGBT community has stood together, largely. There is a movement called TERFs, which is basically just like a right-wing movement intended to co-opt feminism to use it to attack others, basically. It's not even like a feminist movement. I mean, the name of it is trans exclusionary radical feminism. In reality, it has almost nothing to do with feminism. It focuses solely around attacking trans people and basically nothing else.
in America because they too are speaking out against the evilness and the twistedness of an individual who was born a male but now believes that they are a female, or if they're born a female, they're now believing that they are male. We got to.
Yeah. The reason he's going after people like this, going after the trans community, is because it's popular right now. It's just the thing to do at the moment. Unfortunately, people are doing it. It's the popular thing to do. It gets likes, it gets subscriptions, it gets claps at Trump rallies and stuff. Honestly sad. Deeply sad.
That they are male. We got to stop it. And how do we stop it? By being bold enough to do what Flashpoint.
How do you stop it? By limiting people's freedom of expression. That's really what this is all about, right? By trying to stop people from living the way they want to live, they are being anti-freedom. That's what's happening right now. They are destroying people's rights to think and do what they want to do. People were perfectly free to do whatever, and now they are trying to stop that. Don't tell me you're the party of freedom ever again.
What Gene Bailey, what you and the rest of the team is doing is opening up our mouths and identifying those individuals who are watching this broadcast to do the same thing on your local level. Don't be afraid to open your mouth and speak against this.
Yeah, John Graves, what are your thoughts? What do we do?
Attack trans people. That's the whole bit here. Attack trans people at all costs. This is so sad and wrong, honestly.
I agree with him. Honestly, the LGBTQ movement has hijacked the civil rights movement, in my opinion. If I'm born black and there's a history of what happened in this country with somebody who's born black, that should be an offense and an affront to me if someone who can just subjectively say, today I want to be a man, tomorrow I want to be a woman, or I want a fluid between them, or on and on and on. It is not.
It has nothing to do with that. You know what this is really about? Attacking people for their identity. Attacking people for their identity, ultimately. That's what it really boils down to. Attacking somebody because of who they are, because of some quality about them. That's what bullies do, and that's what the civil rights movement was all about. It was an attempt to give people the ability to live their lives and express themselves and be who they are without constantly being attacked by others. That is what it was always about. And these people are changing that idea after the fact, changing the civil rights to be about black civil rights very specifically, and intentionally excluding anybody else because they want to attack them. It's honestly disgusting and sad.
Just unfair to the people in this country. Go beyond even civil rights to girls. My boys and girls all play AAU basketball. They play at high school level in a large school, and it's unfair for my daughters to then go compete against boys for scholarships, for championships, for anything else they're doing.
Okay, interesting argument. Not necessarily. There's an objective answer here. We can look at the data and tell if their hormone levels are the same as the girls in the championship or on the team or whatever else. We can look at different data points and find out if it is fair or not. And as a matter of fact, that's what they do at the Olympics. They test various different data points, hormone levels, and everything else, and determine if it's actually fair for this person to compete or not. There's an example of a guy who had no legs. He had these blades on his, where his legs were supposed to be. He was an athlete, a runner. And he wanted to compete with everybody else in, the legged people in the Olympics. So I think, what is it called? The IOCC or something? They went through it and tested wind speeds and all that stuff and determined if there really was an unfair advantage given to him or an unfair advantage given to others that he was competing with. Because he had these metal blade type things that he's running on instead of legs. I think they determined in his case that it was a fair advantage. Like there was no real advantage. He was allowed to compete. And they do the exact same testing with trans people. There are limits. There are rules about how much of a certain hormone you're allowed to have in your body, going up to a certain point but not surpassing it and things like that. If there's that level of testing and checking and making sure that everybody is playing fair and getting a fair shake, I have no problem with it. I'm perfectly fine with trans people competing in sports like that. That is perfectly fine with me. In fact, I want it because it encourages inclusivity. If there's no harm to it, only benefit, I want that. I'm in favor of it. That being said, culture is at a point right now where that's not an option. Culturally, trans people will be attacked if they win a competition, even if they had a fair advantage, even if everything was completely and totally 100% fair, even if they didn't have more of a certain hormone or whatever in their body than they needed or whatever else. It doesn't matter. Culturally, people like this are going to scream about it at the top of their lungs, and nobody will accept their victory, even if it was fully deserved and earned. And for that reason, I think that it's not likely that trans people are going to get to compete in sports like that. It's just, I want it to be differently, but culture is at a place right now that won't accept it, unfortunately. But anyway, that's where we are. Somebody says, I'm not weighing in on trans sports. I don't know enough. All the science is not clear. Right. Well, I think the science is clear. I think I'm not fully informed on it. But here's my rule with it, okay? If people can measure and determine scientifically that there is not an unfair advantage, I am all for it. I want trans people to compete in sports like that. That's my line. If we can determine there isn't an unfair advantage, which we are capable of doing, I want them to compete. However, there is no way in hell Republicans are going to let them get away with competing. They're going to scream about it and cry and all of that other stuff, make obnoxious fools of themselves as usual. And the win that they receive will not be considered legitimate for that reason, unfortunately. So anyway.
Biologically made difference. When we're dead in 100 years, somebody can dig up our DNA and there's either an XY chromosome, an XX chromosome. It's undeniable who we are.
Okay, in 100 years, we're not going to be looking at chromosomes. And did he say chronozone with an N, like Nancy, rather than an M, like Mary? It's chromosome. He does realize that, right? And aside from that, we're not looking at chromosomes in 100 years. They'd be looking at the pelvic, what do you call it? The pelvic area. That's how you usually determine if somebody was born male or female. But aside from that, that doesn't mean better necessarily. Being born one or the other does not mean you were born better. It does mean that you are likely to be stronger in some ways. And for that reason, I think that we should do the tests. Make sure that people aren't getting an unfair advantage. That's possible. It's possible to do those tests. But they just want to scream about it and make a big deal and pretend that people are just trying to get unfair advantages and the left has gone crazy, as always.
From our anatomy, how God created us, and we shouldn't be allowed to transform the whole universe and make everybody else alter what they do because we're narcissists of who we are. Now, a lot of these people are hurting. We should be...
Wait, how are they forcing you to alter what you do? I don't understand. How is this guy what is his behavior being changed to? Because trans people exist. I don't understand what he's even talking about. Nobody's altering their behavior. All they want is to be included in things and not hated. That's all anybody ever wants. To not be hated. But they can't even do that.
passionate to them, and we always need to remember, and I just said this yesterday to somebody who was looking at all the confusion in his family. I said, you have to remember, these are hurting people, but you can't let hurt people hurt other people, and that's what's happening in our country right now.
Wait, how are trans people hurting others? I don't understand. This makes no sense at all. Like I said, if there is an unfair advantage, they are not allowed to compete in sports right now. Like, that's currently the rule. They have to have certain hormone levels and things like that that are equivalent to their peers, to the people they're competing with. They're not hurting anybody. These people just want to make a big deal out of it and attack them. They're looking for a scapegoat. They're looking for somebody to hate, because their life isn't complete if they're not hating somebody.
All right, so...
And Gene, I want to say this just to piggyback on what he's saying, because, listen, the reality of it is, if we're not putting a stop to this transgender movement, that is, and you're right, we need to be praying for them, but we also have to stop it legalistically, just like what's happening in Florida, right? There's the MAPS, the Minor Attracted Persons. That's a real organization. It's a Pandora's box. And if we don't put a stop...
Dude, what? Is that even a real organization, or is that just what... Isn't that like a 4chan meme? I'm pretty sure that's just like a 4chan, 8chan Kiwi Farms meme intended to like make the left look bad or something. Nobody actually stands for that, for MAPS. Nobody wants to embrace MAPS or whatever else. He's sitting here making it out as though like the LGBT community includes this group of people. Yeah, this is just a meme intended to trick idiots into outing themselves and to trick people into thinking that the LGBT community has gone too far. This is not actually real at all. This is insane, dude.
To this evil that is happening with this transgender movement in America, and how it's been pushed onto our children, how our children are being groomed in the public school system. Then this whole Minor Attracted Persons organization.
Yeah, they are desperate to conflate LGBT community with MAPS, basically. Like I said, MAPS are not real. It was a 4chan meme. Nobody is actually in favor of MAPS or whatever else.
That is the legal name for, right? Those people should be, put to pasture completely.
He's saying they should be killed? Okay, I don't think anybody should be killed, period. But they should definitely be watched and investigated and make sure that they're not doing something they shouldn't be. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody is in favor of that.
Right now, that is a real organization that is pushing.
What's a real organization? Just MAP? Just plain MAP? That's the name of it? MAP? Are you sure that that's not like the name of an object that you use to find your way around when you're traveling? MAP is just a 4chan meme. It is not actually an organization. The dude is completely full of it. But people believe it. The people watching right now believe him. They think that the left has gone so far off the deep end that they're embracing MAPS. Absolutely sad.
For equal rights in America, it is a danger. We got to put a stop to it.
All right, so Rick, when you see that...
If that was happening, everybody would agree. It's not happening. That is a perfect example of the right making something up and then running with it as though it was real in the first place.
What do we need to do? Tell me, who do I call? Who do the Flashpoint Army call?
Ghostbusters.
What do they need to do?
Well, yeah, and let me just take this one step even further, Gene. We have right now, because of exactly what Pastor Mark said, the Pandora's box, thousands, not one or two crazy, thousands of kids that are claiming to be cats. There's literally believe they're cats now.
Can you give me one single example of this? Just one is all I'm looking for. There was a Facebook meme that was going around a while back of like some school teacher claiming that one of her students wanted a litter box or something like that. It was made up. It didn't happen. It was debunked. Yeah, no source on this, of course. This is not happening. These people live in a fantasy land. Seriously. This is all completely made up.
and they go to school and the schools affirm it and let them speak in cat, whatever that is. And we're affirming these things. I thought I was a.
No, they don't. This does not happen. This has never happened. This is completely fabricated, but the listeners believe it. They believe it.
Pirate when I was 9 years old. I'm glad my mom and dad didn't, take out an eye so I could have an eye patch from then on, or take out a leg. Listen, we have got to stop affirming this stuff. How do we do it? Local, local, local. You got to fight at the local school level.
Okay, so what he's doing here, he's describing how they fight what they don't like, okay? Now, it's honestly obnoxious and ridiculous, but think about what he's saying here and apply it to your own movement, okay? What he's saying about how you fight this is correct. This guy's a lawyer and knows how to flip districts and get things done. Listen to him describe how we go about winning. Apply it to our side.
Listen, we have got to stop affirming this stuff. How do we do it? Local, local, local. You've got to fight at the local school level. You've got to support Christian schools like the one in Florida where they stood up and said, we're not going to put up with this nonsense. We're not going to use all these goofy pronouns. We're going to call.
Dude, what is he even talking about? What school is he talking about? Christian school? What? And aside from that, the point here is definitely get involved on a local level. It is very important that you get involved on a local level. You must. This is how we win. Go down to your board of education and vote for board members. Vote for everybody, all the way up the chain. And spread memes. You've got to fight in the meme war. It's important, seriously.
A male, and a female, and the media is lambasting that little school right now and going after them and trying to completely cancel them and destroy them. So we have to stand behind those who are.
Dude, who's he even talking about? Is he just making something up to make these people out to be victims? I don't even know what he's talking about right now.
Willing to stand up. Get your kids out of the schools that aren't willing to stand firm on God's word and the basic biology that the whole world agreed upon until 15 seconds ago. But it's going to take local standing. Go speak at your local public school and tell them you do not want boys and girls bathrooms, all the things that we've seen happen over the last year and a half. Do not stay silent. Take 30 minutes or take an hour once a month to show up at that school board meeting and let your voice be heard, or wherever it is that God's calling you to be heard. States.
He's right. We need to show up at these local school board meetings and listen and talk, respond to them, get involved, do all of this stuff. He's trying to get Republicans involved. Well, guess what? They are. You know why? Because they view this as a moral imperative. They believe that if they don't go to these school board meetings every week or every month or whatever, they may not make it into heaven. They believe that this is like a requirement from God to do. If they don't do it, they are displeasing God. Seriously, we have to get there, because if we don't, they will.
We've got to pass these laws that prevent this nonsense. We got to get legislators that have enough backbone to stand up to this movement, governors that are willing to not take the money from the medical industrial complexes making millions of dollars on these surgeries that are so destructive right now. We've got to stand in every one of these areas.
He's obviously just not in favor of people expressing themselves. He's obviously not in favor of freedom of expression, doing what you want to do, living your own life and leaving people alone. He seems to be in favor of like extreme state control, authoritarian control. Can people not just live their lives and do what they want to do? Your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. What happened to that? What happened to traditional philosophies of live and let live? That's what this country was built on. That's why these religious nutterbutters were capable of bringing their religion to the U.S. in the first place. But now that they're here and they have found their way to political power, they no longer want people to live their own lives and do what they want to do. They now want to force others to live the way that they live. They want to impose their beliefs on everybody else. Honestly, disgusting.
Surgeries, that's exactly right. A lot of money is to be made. But again, I'm going to say, when you say go local, Rick, I'm sitting at home. Who do I? Should I still call my representative and my congressman, or
Yeah,
or what do I
actually,
do?
let me be more specific. Million Voices is a great organization to get involved in, and they'll help plug you in. Moms for Liberty, Moms for America, wallbuilders.com, patriotacademy.com. Start a Constitution class and build yourself a little army in that local area that can show up at these meetings together. And I mean that, of course, in terms of numbers, not in terms of violence. The left is always going to take us out of context.
Oh, no, that's the problem. You have literally done an insurrection against the U.S. government. I don't feel it's unfair for me to ask for more context when you talk about violence. Just throwing that out there.
But there's so many options for this right now, and I'm probably rattling off too many, but you don't have to start from scratch. That's really what I'm trying to say. You don't have to create a new organization. You don't have to figure this out on your own. There's so many groups that have started in the last couple of years that are really good, really strong, and they'll plug you right in. They know the rules. They know how to train you to go testify at those committee meetings and all the things that it's going to take. So don't feel like
There are organizations out there that will help the left, help Democrats and others figure out how to canvass and show up at school board meetings and the whole 9 yards. And you should definitely get involved in those if you don't know how already. If you don't have the time, that's okay. I get it. Not everybody does. At least spread around a few memes online. That's how we defeat this stuff. Spread memes around, if nothing else. If absolutely nothing else. You would be surprised how important it is and how valuable it is to spread memes around. Really, it really is. Funny enough, I haven't looked into this myself, so I don't know how credible it is, but there's a streamer named Vosh who started this thing. I think it's vosh.gg/map, unrelated to the thing that what's his name Mark Burns was talking about earlier. Yeah, there's a thing called vosh.gg/map, and they have some kind of a canvassing thing that you can check out. I don't know how legit it is. Make sure you check it out yourself. I'm not endorsing it because I know nothing about it. But I know he's trying to start a canvassing thing. So, anyway. All right, let's keep listening to Rick Green here.
like you're starting from scratch.
All right, so John, real quick, what can millionvoices.org do?
So if people want to sign up at millionvoices.org, they
Oh, I see. So Million Voices is this guy's thing. I guess he runs Million Voices. I was wondering who he was. I knew he was a CEO of something.
do that, and we have built a tool no matter where you live in all 50 states. You can also just text MV to 80550, and we will, for free, connect you to your state rep, your state senator, and then whoever is appropriate, whether it's Attorney General, Secretary of State, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, or at the federal level. Whatever one is most appropriate for the issue you select. It takes just a couple minutes on the web or 10 seconds, and we do that every single month. We got people now that are using their voice, finding their voice, running.
That does exist on the left, things like that. I don't know what it's called or where to find it, but it is out there, and I should definitely know. I should definitely look this up so I can point people in the right direction later.
For different offices. It's really, really exciting. My passion is to make the people the heroes, to make the people the voices that can change these things. You can go to Rick's organization. I think it's phenomenal. They'll train you at another whole level, and you can train other people to do that. You can take over your school board if you know enough people to get together in a group. They have these classes, and they'll train you week after week.
If you don't get out there and do this stuff, they will be. You can bet on that.
After week for several weeks, and then you're going to be ready to make the difference. We're called to be salt and light. And if we're not speaking, we're not using our voice, we're the answer. We can't sit back and look at all these things that are wrong. Yes, it's dark, but God does his best work when it's dark. In fact, in the dark.
Yeah, speaking of which, why doesn't God do this himself, fix these problems himself? Why doesn't God step in and resolve all of this? Why is God relying on you, all of these people, to resolve this? Kind of weird, right? Is it just me?
darkness, he speaks, let there be light. In the chaos, he speaks, let there be order. We have that same spirit living inside of us, and with God's anointing, we can overcome all of this nonsense that's happening. But don't fool yourself. This is a spiritual war that's going on, and it takes the body of Christ to answer it.
Well said, John.
Amen. And Gene, in fact,
Spiritual war. That kind of language is deeply disturbing.
I could add to that, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. Right? We have to be strong and of a good courage. We have to have remember that we've been given not a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. I mean, all through the Bible is telling us not to be afraid of this stuff.
Yeah.
We look at this destruction. You don't have to run in fear. You don't have to cower. You got to stand up. You got to speak out. Use Million Voices. Use PatriotAcademy.com. Watch Flashpoint consistently, and you'll be equipped with the things you need. But you don't have to be fearful, and you can actually be joyful even in the middle of this fight.
That's right.
That's right. All right, let me move quickly, gentlemen. I need to go to this next topic because it's in the public eye, lest we forget what happened with a virus and pandemic. And Anthony Fauci says, I didn't shut.
Oh, no. He's going to talk about Fauci now. Oh, here we go. Ready for this? Buckle up.
Fauci says, I didn't shut down the country.
That's correct. There wasn't a lockdown. Was there like a federal lockdown? I don't remember there being a federal lockdown. I think there's a state-to-state approach, and people were trying, like people like Fauci were trying to get the federal government to do a federal response, but Trump refused. And by the time Biden took office, we had vaccines, and we weren't trying to do a lockdown anymore.
Do you regret particularly the last one, the shutdown, the sweeping shutdown that some said made things worse?
No, I don't, Neil. And in fact, I think we need to make sure that your listeners understand I didn't shut down anything.
Dude, what the hell is this?
I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And the only way to do that is by draconian means of essentially shutting down a country. We know that we can do that if we shut down.
Well, I think one of the things you really need to do, to the extent that you can shut down temporarily.
Dude, are you kidding me? He said we didn't shut down, and now they are making fun of the fact that he said he wanted to shut down. He did. He did want to, but we didn't shut down. See, this is the nature of propaganda. They are pretending that he shut down when he didn't. I mean, Fauci wouldn't have been the one to shut down anyways. Trump would have been the one to shut everything down because he's the one that has that kind of authority. At no point in time did the federal government shut down for a lockdown or whatever. It was a state-by-state thing. And they are sitting here pretending like they're these persecuted people who were forced out of their churches by Anthony Fauci or whatever. They live in a delusional fantasy land.
The country, I think, is important.
Well, if I knew at the time that shutting down would have such a dramatic effect on controlling the spread, obviously we would have shut down earlier. There are those who say you shut.
Seriously, they didn't shut down at all. They did not shut down at all. This didn't happen. That's the problem.
Down you destructive things by disrupting the economy. And others say, well, if you save so many infections by shutting down, why didn't you shut down 2 weeks earlier? But I don't regret saying that the only way we could have really stopped the explosion of infection was by essentially, I want to say shutting down. I mean, essentially having the physical separation and the kinds of recommendations that we've made.
You've been a big fan of Cuomo and the shutdown in New York. You've lauded New York for their policy. New York had the highest death rate in the world. How could we possibly be jumping up and down and saying...
Yeah, New York had the highest death rate in the world. He says that as though New York isn't the biggest city or one of the biggest cities in the world. The biggest city in the United States, maybe. As if New York City is not massive, but we're talking about a per capita level. See, this is how propaganda works. They are twisting the facts and information to make things look completely different than they actually are. To make Fauci look like a monster, to make it look like New York did a terrible job and suffered terribly because they didn't know what they were doing, when in reality, New York did phenomenally well. I mean, we suffered terribly here, but we did really well considering the fact that it hit here first, and it's one of the biggest and most densely packed cities in the world. He's completely ignoring the nuance. This is how you do it. This is how you propagandize. Ignore nuance. Spread misinformation and pretend that it's simple and straightforward and basic rather than what it actually is, which is complicated. Everything is more complicated than Rand Paul likes to make it out to be.
Oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job. He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you
No, okay, that's a complete misunderstanding of the situation. Do you mean he had the worst death rate, or do you mean he had the highest death count? What do you mean? There are a billion different terms that you could apply here, and not all of them do apply to Cuomo. Aside from that, he got hit first. New York City was hit before any other city in the United States. This is all propaganda. It's disgusting.
Out and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job. He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator.
Yep, he did. That's exactly right. He's propagandizing. He misconstrued it. He is twisting it around to be something that it's not because he wants people to hate the left. Honestly sad.
He didn't shut down anything, Rick. He didn't.
He didn't. He didn't. He actually did not. There was not a federal shutdown of the U.S. government. Trump was in charge. Not Fauci. Trump. And Trump chose not to shut anything down. But, you know, they completely forget that Trump was, like, actually in charge through this whole thing.
Down anything.
This
What's your
guy,
problem?
I loved Ron DeSantis' comment yesterday. Would somebody please take this little elf and just chuck him across the Potomac? Best line DeSantis has had in a very long time. Listen, why would he tell the truth now, right? Why would he not continue to lie? He lied about masks. He lied about the jab. He lied about the shutdowns.
He lied about masks? No, he didn't. Masks are actually helpful. Masks do a lot of good. He lied about the vaccine? No, he didn't. The vaccine was extremely helpful. It saved a lot of lives. He lied about the shutdown? No, he didn't. These people live in a fantasy land if they believe this stuff.
I've said it over and over again. This man did more damage to the United States, more lives lost, more businesses lost, more damage to the economy, all of those things than any other single human being in our history. We've never done this before.
Great. Give me some evidence if that's something you believe. These people don't need evidence. They don't need evidence to believe anything. They just believe it. Simple as that. They always have. They're willing to believe whatever, as long as it's backed up by their donors and their favorite political leaders. They're willing to believe anything. It's honestly sad.
In all of history to deal with a pandemic. They made this stuff up, and it had tremendous damage, but it gave them power and control, and that's what they really wanted. A lot of us were shouting from the rooftops from the beginning, but I'm telling you, this guy deserves to be in prison. He doesn't deserve to be praised.
Why? Why does he deserve to be in prison? What did he do that warrants going to prison? If he really did something that warrants going to prison, then please lay it on me. Tell me what it is. And give me evidence of what you think it is. Screaming that somebody should be in prison like this with absolutely no reasoning behind it is deeply authoritarian and concerning. This is the kind of thing that I see authoritarians doing all the time.
Hope that a Republican Congress will do what they say they're going to do in investigating he and Dr. Birx and others who lied to the American people. How many people?
Wow, investigating Dr. Birx? I find that really interesting. She was basically a shill for Trump. She's willing to do whatever Donald Trump wanted her to do or say or whatever. Really interesting that they turned on her, of all people.
People died because of their silencing of the treatments that were actually working, and they did it because the federal statute said you cannot have an emergency authorized vaccine if there are treatments that would take care of the.
Oh, give me a break, dude. Did you catch what he just said? He basically just said they censored treatments that actually worked in favor of the vaccine. So basically what he's saying is we wanted to take hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, but you made us take the vaccine instead. And he's like pissed off about it. Give me a break. This is embarrassing.
Problem. So they knew with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and budesonide and all these other things, they would not be able to do the vaccine on an emergency authorization.
No. Ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine objectively didn't do anything for anybody. We know that for a fact. They were worthless. They didn't help anybody. But, you know, they've got to demonize the people that they hate and spread their anti-science message at any cost, whatever it takes.
That's why they lied about all those things, and hundreds of thousands of people died because of it. It's horrible what they did to the American people, and the way you put that clip together, Gene, I'm borrowing that, man. That was so good.
Well, actually, full disclosure.
No evidence required, of course.
We didn't put it together. Producer Jason found it.
Well,
so it is a good clip. In fact, you know, at the next step, I know these other guys are wanting to talk, but I know the next step, you look at Fauci, you end up, without a doubt, you're going to end up in China. What?
What does that mean? You're going to end up in China. What?
This.
China is not our enemy. I believe then, and I'm even more convinced now.
Oh, they had to go back. What? How many years is this? Is this 2011? Is it actually 2011? I'm not really sure about that. Maybe. I guess it could be 2011. This is old. Really old. China had a completely different relationship with us, 10 years ago than they have today. China is very obviously going down a concerning path right now and not the U.S.'s friend. But once again, they want to make it out like the left believes China to be friends with the U.S. The left does not like China either. Like, the left isn't like the biggest fan of China. Like, we want to hang out with them and they're our best friends and we think they're fantastic and we want to change our government over to theirs. No, that's not what this is about. He's pretending Biden wants to, work with China or whatever. It's ridiculous.
The rising China.
Okay, everybody in government would like to work with China. Unfortunately, China has proven themselves to be a little over the top, kind of aggressive, extremely authoritarian, and they tend to do really disturbing stuff. But, paint the left as anything that you hate. That's how they work. No nuance. The left is just plain evil.
Is an incredibly positive development for not only China, but the United States and the rest of the world. It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. China is a great nation, and we should hope for the continued expansion. We want to see China rise. A rising China can be a significant asset for the region and the world. China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks, but guess what?
They're completely taking this out of context. I mean, they took the words that he said and they split them off of the rest of the sentence. They're removing context entirely from this. This is not what Biden was trying to communicate at all at the time.
They're not competition for us. China's not our problem. We can help them with some of their problems. China's not a problem. The idea that China is going to eat.
Seriously, they're removing context entirely. That is not what Biden was trying to communicate. And why are they doing this? Because they want to make it out like the left worships China, like a god or something. The left does not like China any more than these people do. Seriously.
Our lunch is bizarre. And so, what are we worried about? We talk about China as our competitor. We should be helping.
Do you think, in retrospect, that you were naive?
Wow, that's interesting. Did you hear the last one? He said, we should be helping, and the subtitle said China, but he didn't actually say that.
We should be helping.
Do you think, in retrospect...
Why did they cut it off right before he said the next word? Weird, right? Is that strange to anybody else? Why cut it off at the last word? Because it's propaganda, political propaganda, intended to manipulate gullible suckers into believing something that's not true. That's why.
The fact that you were naive about China?
No. What a beautiful history we wrote together.
What a beautiful history, Pastor Mark. China.
Listen. Let me be clear. Micah said I got 30 seconds. So let me just give you my one quick statement, right?
You didn't have to lead it up with like 10 seconds of listens. Just get to it.
Need to relaunch the House of Un-Americans Activity Committee, which was a committee that was done back in the 30s.
Oh my God, dude. If you guys are unfamiliar, have you ever heard of McCarthyism? McCarthyism's this thing where the U.S. government basically sought out anybody who might have communist leanings, and this was all done by the House of Un-American Activities Committee. They sought out people who might have communist leanings, whether they were communist or not. People would accuse somebody of being communist, and they would make them lose their job. They'd make them lose everything, their house, and they, in some cases, would even throw them in jail. It was a deeply, deeply disturbing period of time in American history. The House of Un-American Activities Committee was evil, straight up evil. And we look back at that time as Americans as something that we never want to go back to, ever, because it was so evil. But this guy is sitting here telling us he wants to bring it back. They would charge people with treason for being a communist, or even being accused of being a communist, for supposedly being a communist. Charge them with treason and put them in jail for the rest of their lives. That kind of thing. It was bad. Real bad.
The House of Un-American Activities Committee, and we need to make sure that Fauci and others like him be held for treason against the damage that they have done to the United States of America. Treason, treason, treason.
John Graves, do you think the American public's buying that we should be on board with China?
That is so wrong, what Mark Burns just said about the House of Un-American Activities Committee. Those who are not as familiar with the history of that group or whatever may not be as disturbed as they should be. It is so deeply fucked up that he's recommending this.
I think the American public, thankfully, is finally waking up. They're not just getting information with TikTok. They didn't just spread COVID all over this country. They interfered with the election on multiple levels, and it's starting to come out. We talked about that on Flashpoint last week. They literally are buying land, military land, buying our farms, and they can't come at us from...
What, China is buying military land? What are you talking about? Are people even allowed to buy military land, for that matter? Is that something people are allowed to do? There are some situations in which you definitely need to, prevent certain things like that from happening. Like maybe we should ban China from buying some of our land or whatever else. If that's the case, great. I have no opposition to that. If there's something going on with China where they're trying to buy up properties or whatever, stop it. That's fine with me. The reason that it's so revolutionary that I say that in their minds is because they're trying to paint the left as completely unreasonable and obsessed with China. They love China, They think China's just the bee's knees. They'll do anything for China. We're being infiltrated by Chinese spies in the left. It's just ridiculous, dude. Like, get over yourselves, people. Nobody wants China to take over the U.S. government or whatever. They live in a fantasy land.
On from a military standpoint, so they're doing all of these other things. They're the ones putting the fentanyl that's coming in, murdering, the number one cause of murder with our young people in this country right now. And people are finally waking up. We need to pray they continue to wake up and figure out who our real enemy is. And China is at the top of that list right now.
That's true.
Well, I'm not in favor of all the hawkish language about China being at the top of the list. I think Russia's at the top of the list. These people would disagree with that. China is definitely out for themselves, though, unfortunately. And I'm a little worried about, foreign relations on that front. Fun fact, Canada banned foreign purchase of properties because Forex trading companies were driving up the cost of living by buying apartments in expensive cities. Interesting. Didn't know that. So that's Flashpoint. That's who these people are. They're absolutely unhinged from reality. Seriously, I do not say that lightly. They have bizarre beliefs about stuff. Deeply wrong how they act sometimes. If you want to see more stuff from these guys, let me know in the comments or on Twitter @TelltaleAtheist.